Recently, I've been marathoning the Final Fantasy series, which, despite being a mainstay of JRPGs, I had actually never played before coming into this project. I enjoyed the NES trilogy well enough, but they are pretty simplistic and definitely have shown their age, even in the remasters. However, Final Fantasy IV is different. This was the first game that showed me why so many people around the world love this series. Not only was its gameplay story integration phenomenal for the time, but it has also aged like fine wine, and is just as fun to play today as it was when it first came out on the SNES. I made an entire 4-hour-long video about why this is my favorite Final Fantasy game so far. And clearly that's not an uncommon opinion, because this was a popular enough game to spawn a direct sequel several years later, in the form of Final Fantasy The After Years. Because I haven't learned my lesson from Indiana Jones and Star Wars, I assumed that this would be of the same quality as the original Final Fantasy IV. So I decided, instead of diving into FF4, I would take a detour and play through the sequel to my favorite story. I wanted to see what all the characters I grew to love were up to. I wish someone had warned me not to do this. Because despite being released as WiiWare and eventually ported onto the PSP collection, Final Fantasy IV The After Years began life as a low-quality mobile game, and it was very clearly just a cash grab. Final Fantasy IV didn't have the greatest gameplay loop, but at least its gameplay was satisfactory. The plummet in quality when it came to Interlude and the After Years is deep as the Mariana fucking Trench. I mean, maybe that's a little bit unfair of me to say, because I didn't technically play Final Fantasy The After Years. Instead, I started with Final Fantasy IV Interlude, which is meant to bridge the experience between the good Final Fantasy IV and its terrible sequel. But from everything I looked into, The After Years has many of the same problems that Interlude did. So I've decided to abandon playing it, or at the very least delay it until the time it was actually released, and instead I will move on to greener pastures with Final Fantasy V. But in order to justify the 2 hours of my life that I wasted on Final Fantasy Interlude, I want to squeeze some content out of it, so here's the story of how Square Enix's greed ruined my favorite Final Fantasy game. No, you do not get to disrespect one of the greatest openings in video game history. I'll admit, when this initially happened, it did put a smile on my face because I didn't know about the pain I was in for, but in retrospect, I should have been able to tell that this was going for cheap nostalgia points and nothing else. Anyway, the reason that we are gearing up in airships is not for any sort of conflict, but because we are going to Damcyan to celebrate Edward's reopening of it, as he has finally finished the reconstruction of his fallen kingdom. Almost everyone from Cecil's first adventure is coming, with the exception of Fusoya, who is no longer on this planet, and Kain, who is still in self-imposed isolation, training to become a better dragoon for the purposes of his redemption. Despite being invited, both Edge and Rydia have not shown up yet, although we do get short little segments of them getting ready, so presumably they're just running late. Still, it's nice to catch up with the rest of the gang. It feels like meeting an old friend you haven't seen in a while. But something feels a little bit off, and I don't think it was intended. When Porum and Palom get up to their usual bickering shenanigans, Edward says that he missed the way they acted, but Edward never interacted with Porum and Palom. They joined the party after Edward fell off of the ship, and we didn't meet back up with Edward until Porum and Palom were already petrified. Sure, I guess it's possible that Edward met up with them after the events of Final Fantasy IV, like, everyone in Cecil's party were friends and whatnot, but I don't know, it feels weird that Edward is implied to have this pre-established relationship with twins from Mysidia who he has never met on screen before. I guess they attended Cecil and Rosa's wedding together, but like, that's just like, I don't know. It's a nitpick, and I recognize that it's a tiny nitpick, but it felt like a bad omen for the rest of the story to come, and unfortunately, it was. Because after Cecil has a ghostly vision of Rydia in the crystal room, Yang receives a message that there's a crisis in Fabul and something is wrong with his wife. So he needs to rush over Mount Hobbs in order to get there ASAP. And Rosa and Cecil decide to accompany their friend, fearing that the situation will be serious. This is where we get our first taste of what the gameplay is like in Final Fantasy Interlude, and it's awful. Again, Final Fantasy IV didn't exactly have the most complex or engaging combat system, but it did, at the very least, have you fight enemies that were around your level. Mount Fabul is scaled for the early game, yet because Final Fantasy IV Interlude takes place after the main campaign of FF4, everyone in your party is level 35. This means they vastly outlevel the skeletons and bombs on Mount Hobbs, and you can one-shot basically every enemy just spamming the attack command. So combat itself is very boring and unengaging, but the encounter rate is cranked up to 11. Seriously, I can't take 3 steps after leaving one encounter before jumping into another one. And they are all just nothing burgers. Either spam the attack button and kill everyone, or hold down the run away button and run away, but you lose a little bit of gold. Although, as I'll come to find out later, gold basically doesn't matter in Final Fantasy IV Interlude. But since I didn't know that yet, I was slogging my way through a tedious sea of encounters I was way overleveled for. And my reward for this patience was a recycled boss from Final Fantasy IV. I face off against Bomb Dad, which is just Bomb Mom but blue now. I get it, cause boys are blue and girls are pink. And, you know, Bomb Mom was red. So Bomb Dad is blue. Do you get it? Do you fucking get it? Do you get the joke? Because blue fire is hotter than red fire, but also boy is blue. Like, do you get it? Do you get the joke? Do you get the fucking joke? Do you get the joke? It's funny. Bomb Dad. It's funny. It doesn't even fucking rhyme. Bomb Mom rhymes. At least Bomb Mom rhymes. The best part of this fight is you get to use 2 generic monks, and that's kind of funny because, you know, everyone loves generic characters. But then you beat Bomb Dad and you go to Fabul. And would you like to guess what the crisis in Fabul was? Yang's wife, who is still just named Yang's wife, by the way, she's pregnant and she's having a baby now. So Yang rushed back so he could be here, but then he like doesn't want to be there when his wife is giving birth, but then he changes his mind and he goes, because like Rosa's like, hey, you should be there. And he's like, okay. And so then he goes, and then the airship shows up, and Purim and Palom and Sid are like, hey, the dwarves want us to go investigate the sealed cave because there's monsters in the sealed cave. So come with us, Cecil, you fucking douchebag. But Rosa, you stay behind with the baby because you're a woman. Okay, bye. And then they just fly down to the sealed cave. So I hope you went shopping in Fabul because that's the last opportunity you'll ever have to go shopping again. I hope you picked up like ethers and shit and you don't, you know, maybe this happened in my playthrough, but hopefully you don't fucking run out of ethers and just now your mages are useless. Hopefully that doesn't fucking happen. Oh my god, this game. Okay, so we're going to the sealed cave now. The sealed cave is easily the worst dungeon in Final Fantasy IV, so having to play through it again, only with the encounter rate pumped up much higher than either the SNES version or the Pixel remaster, isn't exactly enjoyable. Not only that, but our core group has gone from being over-leveled in Mount Hobbs to under-leveled in the sealed cave. And since you don't have free control of the airship, there's no way to get to an inn or any other source of healing if you want to grind up and have a fair fight going through this dungeon. So instead, you've just got to either fight at a disadvantage or run away from the majority of battles. But of course, there are some battles in the sealed cave you can't run away from, and that is the iconic monster door fights. In case you're not familiar, anytime you try to go through a doorway in Final Fantasy IV, you end up fighting against the monster door, which is a kind of mimic that pretends to be a door but is actually a monster. Pretty self-explanatory. It's a gimmick fight, too. It will select one of your party members and target them, then charge up an instant kill spell for that party member. In vanilla FF4, you can cheese these fights by using the reflect spell to bounce the instant kill back towards the monster door, but unfortunately, Porum doesn't have the reflect spell yet, so instead the best solution to these monster doors is to have her brother Palom spam Quake, which is an absurdly powerful spell that thankfully he gets access to much earlier than you should. And as it turns out, having Palom spam Quake is kind of just the solution to every problem from now on. It's that strong. But after slogging our way through the sealed cave, we come up to another boss fight. Although this one isn't a reskin of an FF4 boss, it's just the FF4 boss all over again. That's right, they couldn't even be bothered to give Monster Wall a new name. And because we are so severely underleveled, without Quake, this boss fight would probably be impossible. Because Monster Wall also has an instant death gimmick, as it is slowly creeping up towards the party, and once it reaches us, it will crush us and kill everyone. So this is a DPS race against time, and without Quake, it's one that we wouldn't win. This is also where I went through about half of my ether supply, because I naively believed that we would be able to go back to the dwarf castle after clearing out the monster wall. But that was not the case. Instead, once we enter the crystal chamber, we find Rydia unconscious. She wakes up when the party approaches her, and then she joins our team and we decide to leave. So, okay, I guess that's that solved. Now there's no more monsters in the sealed cave. I mean, there are, but who fucking cares? Like, let's just get out of here. I don't want to be in this dungeon anymore. Once we reach the surface, however, Rydia starts acting weird. She says they're calling to her and we need to go to the Tower of Babel. And then the entire party sees that the Tower of Babel is glowing, which implies someone is trying to start it working again. And if someone gets the Tower of Babel working, that's no good because last time the Tower of Babel was online, it nearly destroyed the world. But enough of that interesting story. Instead, let's cut away to Edge, who is wandering through the Cave of Eblin for some reason. We don't really get told the reason as to why he's here, he just is. He's also on a solo mission, but he one-shots every enemy you fight, so combat is still incredibly boring. You just either spam ninjutsu against groups, or spam the attack button against less groups of enemies. Yay? I don't fucking know what they're going for. Like, who finds this enjoyable? Who was this made for? This is so bad. This isn't even, like, this doesn't have the excuse of being a NES RPG, and yet it is significantly more simplistic than Final Fantasy 1. It's more simplistic than Dragon Warrior 1. What the fuck? And, of course, the encounter rate is still sky fucking high. But after slogging through the cave, Edge makes it to the Tower of Babel through the back entrance, and, I guess he's gonna meet up with our party, because they're also climbing the Tower of Babel. We left Sid behind, so now it's just Cecil, Porum, Palom, and Rydia, but for some reason Rydia doesn't have access to any of her summons, so she's basically just a worse version of Palom. Although this does change as we make our way up the tower, because we fight a series of annoying mini-bosses, and each of them grants Rydia a new summon. Or at least I assume that's what happens, because I had a full party wipe against the third mini-boss, and the last save point was 30 minutes ago, so I really didn't want to replay more of the Tower of Babel. So instead, I looked up a full game walkthrough on YouTube, and holy shit, the story just is awful. So, after getting all of the summons back, Rydia locks herself in the turret room, you know, the place where Yang killed himself in Final Fantasy IV. Don't worry, he got better. Then she sends a bunch of robots to attack Cecil, Porum, and Palom, but Edge shows up to help them fight the robots, and after they defeat the robots, they break into the turret room, but Rydia isn't in there anymore, so they decide to climb up the Tower of Babel looking for her, and when they find her, Edge is like, that's not the real Rydia, that's a sussy baka imposter. And so then they decide to fight her, and the real Rydia shows up to help them fight her because she has all the summons, and so they gotta fight summon versus summon, and when we defeat the fake Rydia, she just disappears, and then she mysteriously goes to the crystal room and says, Eidolon system complete. Oh yeah, summons are called Eidolons in this for some reason. I think that might just be like a localization change, because I didn't play the PSP version, and this only came out on PSP, but for whatever reason, who fucking cares? I don't want to dig into that, because we're almost done with this garbage game. After fake Rydia disappears, then Cecil goes back to Rosa, and shocker! Rosa's pregnant! Cecil's gonna be a daddy! And everyone's excited, and then that's the end. Fuck this game. It's... The story is uninteresting and nonsensical, which, like, I get it's branching the story between FF4 and FF4 The After Years. So some of the stuff probably makes more sense if you've played The After Years, but it kind of feels like, what is the point then? Because I know The After Years has, like, the next generation, right? Cecil's son is, like, a character in The After Years. He's one of the playable characters. But, like, did we really need to have an entire game to teach us that Cecil got Rosa pregnant? Like, if this is meant to branch the stories, it's doing a piss poor job, because all it's done is discourage me from playing Final Fantasy IV The After Years. Although, I'm sure much of the comment section will agree that that's probably a good thing for them to discourage me from. So, I guess I'll leave it at that and say thank you to my patrons. Thank you to Logs, Glup Shido, Erica Ford, Perg Knight, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Arvis, Crispy Matthews, Floahay, Amy Hazel, Hungry Hearts, Hound Dogs, Burnt to Cinders, Ziggy WSB, Lovis Roman, Shinthia, Faulty Videos, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Anna Cabana, The Daily Fugle, Faye, Magic Bite, Thoughtful Insanity, Robin Goodfeller, JT Spritter, Laura Hunter, Dicyke, Chris, Root Beer Pants, Queen Elizam, Controlled Aegis, Roman Kermantic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, Carrier Has Left, Angel Nap Caceres, Zanwif, Not Gino, Name Number 5, Flingon, Edward C, Cyrockin 2, Cabbage, Caius Cole, Bree, Punchfighter Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Sardonic Muse, Wesley Toma, Name Number 5. Oops, I've listed that one twice by accident. Sensitive Luigi, Rage, Femtal Illness, Wannabe Cinnamon, Punk Tattoo Guy, Key the Iron Idol, Calamity Callie, Jackson McMahon, Saren Girlixy, Rezi, Dino Anna, Alice, Andu, Rhea, Gameboo, Carosa, Fyron, Your Doctor, Frozen Helm, KH, Girl Boss, Lizard Bong Water, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Dylan Solis, Some Trades, Squeegee555, Smoz Ruby, Cycrom, Robin D, Elenby, Thaythom, Clan, Pillow Willow, and Gabe the Green, and especially my Jagans, Hime Rowan, Alexander Roper, Dragonback Lancer, Squid Stats, Autumn, and Siggy. Yes, I know there's a mistake in these credits. I accidentally have Name Number 5 listed twice. I don't know how that happened when I was updating my Patreon, but since the devs of Interlude did not give a shit and didn't do fucking anything, I'm also gonna not give a shit. So that's me. These are my low effort credits. Subscribe to Danny Doyle and subscribe to Patreon and don't play Interlude. It sucks. Hey, so there's a post-credits scene that shows that Kane will return in Avengers Doomsday. What the fuck even is Interlude? Oh my god.